Okay, so today we'll be looking at the healing brush, and it's a bit like the spot healing from last week. It's in the same area. I'll show you that again. This is the healing brush tool. So I've used this background as like an example of what the tool could do. So we've got purple on one side with a very strong line and yellow on the other, and basically it can like blur the two together and create like a gradient over the middle line so it's less harsh. So basically you sample from a section or a colour, and then you can choose to replace something with it, instead of the spot heal where it's sampled for you and it's sampled from around the area that you wanted. So you've got options here. I've got 100% hardness at the moment. I'll just show you what the options can do for you. So if we sample from the yellow using Alt on a Mac, I don't really know what the Windows one is. So you hold down Alt and you press on the yellow, and then you press on the area you want to replace. And you can see it's created a gradient where my brush was from yellow to purple with like pinks and oranges in the middle. And that's how it's decided to blur the two together. If we take it down to about 50% hardness, I'll show you the difference of what it makes. So I'll do one here. And you can see the area of the gradient is much smaller, so it's denser. Again, it's much smaller. So if you want to cover a wider area and make it more seamless, do a higher hardness. Okay, so I'll take those off, I'll go back to 100%. So if I wanted to blur this whole middle line, just sample from the yellow and drag it down the middle. I know it's stopped, it's because I hit an edge, but like, you can redo sections, you can undo it if you don't like it, just put it over the middle until you like the desired effect basically. So it obviously took me a few tries, but that's looking fairly good, I'd say. And there you can have like a nice gradient, and obviously it's not as good as just using the gradient tool, but it can work for improving backgrounds, or like if you've got a shadow on a background behind a model, then you want to like soften that. And this is what this one shows you. So say you had shadow corners on a background, like imagine a model's in the middle, or it's vignetted slightly, and you want to just soften it off, but you don't want to get rid of it. You want to keep some of that dimension. So just sample from the light blue, and exactly the same concept really, and just do it until you're happy with the result. So I'll use this if it's cast a shadow on the background, like the corner of my background somewhere, which it can happen, and you don't realise sometimes until you've put it into the computer, and then you're like, oh no, I have to get rid of it in post now. I can't add a light at the end. So yeah, it does help. And I've by accident dragged my mouse too far down and sample from this bottom corner, so I just undo that and then just make sure I don't move my mouse too far down. And that's a lot nicer gradient compared to the bottom, obviously. So it can work to improve your backgrounds. But instead of block colour, you can use it on stuff like skin. Now, you can use spot healing, but you have a lot more control with healing brush tool. So going to last week's portrait, last week I used spot healing a lot, but that was purely for speed. So I'll use the healing brush tool and show you how you can get more control. So everyone gets blemishes, and obviously we've got some on the chin, and most of the time you want to get rid of them. So remind you how to get to that tool. You hold down your mouse and then it will come up with more options, and then you just pull it over to the healing brush tool. And remember, you sample with this one. So you pick an area of the skin, like the colour of the skin you want to sample from. And I'm working on the example layer. I've just duplicated the background layer so I don't ruin it. You sample from the colour of skin you want to replace it with, and then with Alt, and then you just click on the blemish. And it's a much smoother cover. Spot healing can be a bit harsh sometimes. And that's what you can do in like 30 seconds. So that's pretty good. And obviously sometimes you'll use the clone tool. Like in these areas, the healing brush still blends two areas together and you don't want it. So you will have to use the clone tool sometimes, but it can be quite harsh. So the healing brush can feather out the area or like blend it in more if you need to use the cloning tool. So I'll pick an easier spot for you to see. So obviously there's like a big dark patch now, and if you drag the healing brush along the edge, it smooths it out a lot more. And obviously there's a dark patch still on her face, but you'd pick a colour that you'd want there. So I use them together quite a lot, and this week I'll go over the cloning tool with you so you can like compare the two and see the difference that they can do. And next week I'll be doing like selection tools and stuff, and if you want any other tutorials that you're like desperate for, comment them down below and I'll integrate them into what I've been doing. Thank you for watching, and subscribe if you like it.